crossing county lines just to make my name in the city. Took everything, put it on the line, cause I never break or back down. One shot is do or die, and the odds ain't looking too pretty. But I got the feeling it's my time. I know I'm taking it now.
Good morning and welcome to the Retirement Learning Lab, where we teach you how to retire without the fear of running out of money. My name is Van Richards, and I really want to welcome you all for coming in today to listen. If you're listening to us on Tuesday, you're getting the treat of a live stream, so you can enter into the questions, you can enter into the conversation and hear what's going on live. If you're listening to this as a replay, you can still ask questions and you can still enter it in, because I monitor the different platforms throughout the week, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. But if you're here today, if you're here with me today, just make sure that if you've got a question that you enter it in. If you're listening to us on Periscope or Twitter, just type it in. If you've got an emoji that you want to put in, if you like what you hear, let me know. If you're listening to it on Facebook, there are two platforms that we have available on Facebook. There's the Richards Financial Planning Facebook page, which you can like and follow and get information that's on there. I also have a life insurance page that's called Advice for Life Insurance, and I have a few thousand followers on that one. So thank you all. If you're listening to me on that platform, please feel free to enter into the conversation. Even though that we're not talking about life insurance, we're going to be talking about finances today that will help you retire without the worry of running out of money. And you're going to hear me say that a whole lot today. The other platform that is on Facebook is going to be the Retirement Learning Lab. It's a group. And if you want to join that group, just put out a request. I'll authorize it, put you into it. And if you've got questions that you want to have answered, just put them in there and we can talk about it on the Retirement Learning Lab on the Facebook group. If you see somebody's comment and you've gone through a particular experience and you'd like to comment, it's a private Facebook group. It's not something that we're going to spam you about. Feel free to enter it in. So do that too. Now, there's a lot of good information that I've created over the past week since I've started doing the Retirement Learning Lab live stream, and you can find that most easily on YouTube. So if you're on the YouTube platform, feel free to enter the conversation and you can type in questions. But if I refer to something like I'm going to talk a little bit about the withdrawal strategy or the retirement income floor or something about the economy, look at the library that's available on YouTube and you can find a reference in there. If you want to be notified about what's coming up in the future, be sure that you hit the subscribe button. And then every time that I drop some new information into the YouTube platform, you'll get notified about it and you'll get the information. The whole idea of everything that I do is to help you retire so that you don't have to worry about running out of money. And that's where we're going to go into today. We're going to talk about the bucketing system of retirement income. Now, I talked about this last week just a little bit, actually quite a bit, really. But I had so many questions that came to me this week, mainly through Facebook. If you have a question, be sure that if you're listening to this on the replay, that you just type it in. I had so many different questions that what I did is I put out the top 10 retirement income questions, and those are all based on your comments from last week. So what I want to do today, the format might be just a little bit different than some of the live streams that you've heard me broadcast in the past weeks. I'm going to go through some of what we did last week, and then we're going to get into the questions. And then hopefully, if we've got time today, we'll get into your particular questions. So just remember, I want to go to my little banner over here, and I'm going to do a reminder. As you can see right down here, if you've got a question, type it in, and we'll be sure to get to your question. So where are we going to go today? The very first thing that we want to talk about is the bucketing system of retirement income. What is the bucketing system? Okay. The bucketing system is this. If you like order in your life and you like systems of doing things, if you like predictability, then you're going to like the bucketing system, because this is what the bucketing system does. It's a concept that breaks retirement into segments that are based on what you expect that you're going to spend at different stages of your life. Take a look at this, because I created a short little clip that I think might give you an idea of what I'm talking about. The bucketing system really has 3 or more buckets associated with it. Now, hopefully we don't have this stick too much today, but as I'm looking through this and we go further into it, the first bucket is really a conservative bucket. I'm going to start that all over. You know, when you start with live stream, you never know what's going to happen. For some reason, it's moving a little slow. Hopefully you're going to get to it. Okay, when we get to the second bucket, I'm going to start this again. Okay, great. Hopefully you're seeing this now. The idea of bucketing is really based on 3 buckets to begin with. You start with a conservative bucket, and that bucket's going to be based on 10 years. In the first 10 years, you're going to be investing conservatively. Then in the second 10 years, you're going to go in year 10 through 20. And in year 10 through 20, you're going to be invested a little bit more aggressively. And then in year 20 through 30, you're going to be aggressive more with your investments from that standpoint. Hopefully today, my videos don't stick like that quite as much as they did. But, you know, technology, with everybody using the internet nowadays, it doesn't always work the way that we had hoped that it had. But the idea of bucketing is this. We have generally, to begin with, 3 different buckets. We're going to have the conservative bucket, which is going to be years 1 through 10. And a lot of times that's going to be invested in cash equivalents or in bonds, things that are not going to move a whole lot in value, because it's going to be pretty dependable. Now, what this does is it frees up you so that you can invest a little bit more aggressively in years 10 through 20, and then also in years 20 through 30. Now, if you're older and you're actually in retirement and you're thinking, well, it's too late for me, I can't do the bucketing system. Yes, you can. If you get to a particular stage in your life, what you're looking at is you're looking at continuing to create an income. So maybe what's going to happen is you're going to enter into the third bucket. So we invest it so that it's more conservative and it's paying you an income. The whole concept of bucketing is so that you have predictability in your income, and it's all based on financial cycles. Let's try another video, and hopefully you can see exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about economic cycles and how that works. We've all lived through ups and downs in the markets. And the reason that the bucketing system is based on 10 years is economic cycles. Generally, economic cycles last for about 4 to 5 years. And the idea behind the bucketing system is that the 10-year buckets will last through at least, it's going to last through at least 2 economic cycles. Okay, let's go through that just a little bit more. So I apologize if the videos seem to be sticking. They seem to be sticking just a little bit in front of me today. So we'll just tolerate through that and power through it. Okay, the reason why the buckets are based on the 10-year time frame is because of economic cycles. Right now, we're in a recession. So what's a recession? A recession is going to be a drawback, less spending. Technically speaking, a recession is going to be at least 2 quarters of negative growth in the economy. Gosh, we've got 2 quarters in negative growth right now. You know that February through March was negative because of what happened in the stock market. People are not spending as much money, so we also know that the second quarter is negative. And we're probably going to have less spending and negative growth in the third and perhaps even a fourth quarter. Hopefully it's going to be picking back up. Right now, there's a disconnect in between what's happening in the stock market and actually what's happening on Main Street. And you see this. There's people that are not spending as much money because of what's going on with the coronavirus. And we see the stock market going crazy and going back up. So there is a disconnect. It may correct itself at some point in time, but we are in the midst of an economic recession right now. Recessions accompany expansions. Let me show you what I mean. We've been going through cycles. Economic cycles have 4 different parts to it. They have an expansion, and generally that's going to be about 3 years. We get to a peak, then we hit a contraction, and then we hit the bottom. All of this happens within about a 45-year time period, and it's happened this way since the beginning of economies. Go all the way back to the 1900s. The average recession lasts about 15 months. The average expansion lasts about 3 to 4 years. So the concept of the buckets is so that you can have enough money that's going to last through economic cycles. Now, the economic cycles also have to tie into what's happening in your life. Because if you've got things going on in your life that's different than the economic cycles, it really doesn't matter what's happening on Wall Street. If you don't have enough money to pay for what you need, the bucketing system's not going to work. Now, that's going to be one of the questions that we're going to run into at the very end of today. We're going to talk about what's the best way to figure out if this is the best approach for you. But the concept that we're going to get into right now is we're going to break down your life, okay? When you retire, there's really going to be 3 stages that you're looking at. Let's take a look at another short little video, and I think that you'll get an idea of exactly what I'm talking about. This is in something that's called financial gerontology. It's the study of life stages, and it relates all back to your actual physical activity and your well-being and your health. So let's take a look at that video and see what I'm talking about. The length of the buckets we adjust based for your periods of your life. Now, as you go through your life, you're going to have different stages of activity. When you first retire, you're what we call the young old. You're 50 to 65. It's the go-go years. It's when you're still spending and you're still active. Now, when you get to middle old is generally going to be 65 to 80. You're slowing down just a little bit in your life. You're not as active as you used to be. And actually, it's interesting because you don't spend as much money here. And it kind of skipped over to what's called the old. The old is going to be 80 plus. 80 plus are the no-go years. Now, I know there's some of you out there, some of you are my friends that are listening to this that are in the no-go years, and you're still pretty active from that standpoint. And I don't want to deter you. I think you're doing awesome. So the idea is, though, that you need to plan that you're going to have different amounts of money that you're spending in those different stages. When you go through the go-go years, you're probably spending about the same amount of money that you were spending when you were working. When you get to the slow go years, that's the ages 65 to 80, you're probably not spending quite as much money as you were previously in the go-go years. The reason is because you're not going as many places. You might decide that you want to grow a garden rather than go on a cruise, or you might have other activities that you do in your life. So generally speaking, let's just go back for a minute, and we're talking about budgeting right now. Budgeting are associated with the different stages of your life. So when we're in the go-go years, you have to budget because it's possible that you can be spending more money than you were when you were working, and that's a danger that you run into. So it's important that you have a budget. When you get to the slow go years, you're going to probably have about a 20 to 25% drop in what you're spending because you're not as active as you used to be. Now, when you get to the no-go years, ages 80 plus, it's a good possibility that you're going to be spending more money for what? For medical problems or medical expenses. Take a look at the little video that I've got prepared for you on budgeting, because budgeting is so important in your life. All the buckets are designed based on budgets. It might be budgets that are based on actual expenses, or it might be forecasted monies. We've talked about the money that's being spent in the go-go years. When we get to the slow-go years, it's a little less money. But then again, when you get to the no-go years, I know that gets confusing. The no-go years, the 80 plus, you're spending more money because of medical expenses. Okay, so let's get back over to what we were talking about from the bucketing approach. We've talked a little bit about income, and let's add that back into the stream. We've talked about budgeting. The length of the budgets they're based primarily on your expenses. And your expenses are estimated or they're real. Now, when I sit down with somebody and I do a financial plan, and we're talking about using the bucketing system, we're looking at what is being estimated that's going to be spent at different stages of your life. When you're in those go-go years, the ages 50 to 65, generally you want to target maybe 70 to 80% of your income when you were working. So you're spending a little bit less money, and that's what you're wanting to replace. How are you going to do that? You're going to have a couple of different streams of income that you're creating. If you go back and you look at the retirement income flooring video, you'll see that you're building a guarantee that's in there. Then the other part of the first bucket is the monies that's going to supplement your retirement income floor. That's going to began with perhaps if you have a pension, if you're a teacher, or if you have Social Security or something like that, that's available to you to help supplement that very first bucket. Then when you get to the second bucket, the idea is that you're building a budget that's going to be based on how much money that you expect to be spending. And that's going to last for, let's hope, 10 to 15 years. Remember the cycles. We're trying to get through at least 2 economic cycles. If we're looking at what the financial gerontologists are telling us, then we're looking at perhaps as much as a 15-year time period. And then once we get to the no-go years, we want to make sure that you're budgeting for different medical expenses that are going to be associated with health issues that you might be experiencing as well. Okay, the next question that might come to your mind is, okay, I've got these 3 different buckets that I've created. So how the heck do I invest this money? Well, the simple answer to that is we're going to go from conservatively invested to more aggressively invested. The first bucket is going to be based on the fact that you don't want any volatility for the first bucket because that's your income that's coming out. Generally, it's going to be invested in bonds or cash equivalents, something that's not going to fluctuate in value. When we get to the 10 to 20 year for those slow-go years, and we're looking at this from the very beginning, okay? So if we're looking at that year 10 through 20, what we're trying to do is we're trying to invest a little bit more aggressively. We have less time to make up for economic turmoil like what we're seeing right now. But then if you're in the very beginning and you're starting your retirement and you're looking out 30 years or 20 years, actually, that you're 20 year through 30, you do have enough time so that you can plan and you can invest just a little bit more aggressively than you were previously. I'm just going to give you a general flavor of how the buckets are invested, but I'm not going to go into a great detail because it's very individualized. So let's take a look at that just for a quick second. Each bucket has a purpose. Each bucket also has a certain level of risk that's associated with it. Now, the way that I design buckets for people is I have 9 different portfolios that I use, and I will customize those for clients. And I'm going to have 12 different categories of investments that I'm going to put into those different portfolios. Let's look at what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about the categories, I'm talking about different types of stocks, different types of real estate, commodities, bonds, cash alternatives. It's a wide variety of investments, and I've put it into 12 different categories. Now, what we do is we weight these different categories, and by weighting the categories, that's going to affect your risk. Logically speaking, you're going to have less risk if you have cash equivalents in bonds, as opposed to if you had commodities or real estate or small cap stocks. Now, I'm going to show you a graphic that gives you an idea of how the portfolios work. And it's not, you can't see what the specifics are. And I did that on purpose because it's going to be individualized for what you need. All of these that you're seeing on the screen right now are called strategic allocations. These are the strategic asset allocations. Now, if you're looking up here, let me activate my pen for just a second. If you're looking at this particular portfolio right here, you're going to see that this portfolio is going to be weighted more on bonds here, okay? This is probably the most conservative allocation that I would recommend to a client. Now, if I go over to the right and you look at this particular graph, you're going to see that there's more in stocks. Now, how much is in bonds? Remember, this is the most aggressive allocation. When we look at it, you're going to see a small slice right here that may be in bonds. It depends upon you as a client. You might not want bonds at all. I have some clients that just say, I'm not investing in bonds, which is quite all right. It just depends on what you are using and how you're using the monies in the buckets in themselves. So let's go on just a little bit from this standpoint. Now, do you just set it and forget it? Absolutely not. You don't just shut your eyes and say, okay, I've got this strategic asset allocation. I'm not going to do anything with it. The way that we work with clients is we review it, and at least quarterly, we're going to make adjustments based on what's going on in the economy. The small adjustments are called tactical asset allocation changes. And it might be that we're looking to take advantage of things that are happening in the economy. Like right now, if you look at what's happening with some particular stocks, you'll see that communication stocks may be more profitable. You may see that travel stocks are less profitable. You want to make sure that you make those small tactical asset allocation changes in your portfolio so that you either take advantage of what's going on in the economy or you avoid problems that are going on in the economy. Now, that's not going to change too much of the big picture. Remember all the different pie graphs that we just looked at? That's not going to change that particular thing that much, but it's going to change over time. There are particular things that we look for that will change your big allocations, will change your strategic asset allocations. Take a look at this, and I think that you're going to get an idea of what I'm talking about. Strategic allocations change as parts of your life change. Of course, it's going to be based on investments and the risk that may be associated with that. But what happens when you have family dilemmas? That changes the way that allocations can be placed. Risk from government, risk of not having a good budget could make you go broke, so you got to be careful of that. The risk of not working, you may need to work longer. That may be a risk that you have to manage. And then the last one, but not the least one, is going to be the risk of getting older. Let's get back out of that just for a minute. Okay. Let me bring this back up for just a minute because I want to share this with you and talk about it just a little bit more. The risk of these are the things that are going to motivate changes to the big investments, the big allocations. So when you have the strategic asset allocation changes, it's going to be based on different factors that are happening around you. Number one, as you can see on the screen, when you have changes in investments, that can cause a change in what you have allocated for the strategic asset allocations. If you have family dilemmas, let's say, for example, that if you have a spouse that has to go into a long-term care facility, or a spouse passes away, or you have a child that's disabled, or you have a child that comes and moves back home, or you have a grandchild that comes and lives with you. All of those are going to affect how the buckets work for your benefit. And you're going to possibly make changes in your allocations over time based on what's happening in your life. Also, number three, you see changes of government and political change. Gosh, that's happening right now. You're looking at the government putting a lot of money back into the economy, and you're looking at what's going to be happening in the future. You're also looking at the Federal Reserve that's pumping up the bond market to keep the stock market stable. Is that going to last forever? We don't know. But the idea is you may need to change your strategic asset allocations based on what government or political changes are happening. If you need to go back to work because money's running low, that's a risk that you run into. And then, of course, the last one is going to be just the general risk of getting older and running out of money. So remember, we're going to go back to the whole idea that we talked about in the very beginning, and that is everything that we do is based on helping you to live without running out of money. That's the whole idea. So let's look now at, we're going to go into some of the different questions that we had for the week. It was a great week last week. We had a whole lot of questions that came in through Facebook especially, and there were so many of them that what I did is I boiled them down to the top 10. And let's take a look and see what they are and talk about those just a little bit, because I'll guarantee you that some of these questions are going to be something that you're experiencing right now. So let's take a look at that. The first question that came to me this week was, do I need to plan on income increases every year for inflation? Well, the simplest answer there is no, you really don't. Because if we look at what's happening this year, is there going to be any inflation in 2020? Probably not. It's really interesting. Someone that I know had mentioned to me that 2020 may be something, it may be a term that we use in a negative fashion in the year. Like, man, I don't know what was going on. It was just 2020, like, you know, it was a terrible thing that happened. So the idea of 2020 is we're not going to have inflation in this particular year because of slowdowns in the economy. And you probably don't need to increase your income because you're not going to have cost of goods increasing. So the simple answer for that is no, you don't have to worry about inflation every year, but you do have to look at your budget annually. That's the whole idea. You need to look at your budget on an annual basis to make sure that you're keeping up your spending. Perhaps you're spending too much. If you're not spending as much as you could, you can make adjustments there too. But with inflation, no, you don't. So let's take a look at the next question. How do I know if the bucket approach is the best way for me to set up my income? Now, if you've listened to my live streams over the past weeks, you've heard me talk about retirement income flooring. And you've also heard me talk about the withdrawal approach to retirement income. And in talking about that, now we're talking about the bucketing approach. These are the three major systems that people use for retirement income. How do you determine if that particular approach is going to be the best one for you? Well, it has to be whatever approach that you decide upon. you must be able to answer these three particular questions. Let's take a look at them. Number one, let me make this just a little bit bigger so that you can see it. Does the approach that I'm using, does it make clear how much money that I can take out and how many years that it's going to last before I need to go to another source? So if I have 3 buckets that I'm creating, or 4, however that you use it, does it clearly define how much money I can take out and when I need to go to another source for income? Now, the next question that needs to be answered is, do you know which accounts you'll take the income from and when you should change? Now, some people look at the bucketing approach as that one bucket pours into the next bucket and pours into the next bucket. I disagree with that concept. The idea for bucketing is it's based on time segments of your life, just everything that we've talked about. It's going to be based on the years of 10 through 20 and 20 through 30, and then the beginning years. So you have to have an idea of which accounts that you're going to take money from and what would possibly change. Maybe those 6 risks that we talked about just a minute ago. What's going to change in your life that's going to motivate you or require you to take from the very next bucket? And then the third question that you need to be able to ask is going to be, are you clear on when you need to rebalance your holdings? Now, what I mean there is, if the stock market does very well for a period of years, your risk is going to naturally increase. So you may need to rebalance so that you're not taking as much risk overall. If you're not spending that money, perhaps you need to put it into something that's a little bit more conservative so that it is there for that long-term bucket for the no-go years, perhaps. So if you can answer all of these particular questions, then you have found the very right system for you. Okay. The third question, and this was something that I thought was really interesting. I have a bucket list of things I want to do before I die. How do I do these things without taking money away from my everyday income? That is a great question, and I'm glad that it got asked, because if you're looking at things that you want to do, perhaps that you want to fund something for your church or your synagogue as a charity, perhaps that you have a child that you want to help, a grandchild, or just you want to start a scholarship program for someone, or for a particular college that you perhaps are alumni for, or you have another purpose that you have in mind. Maybe it's just you want to buy a boat. Maybe you want to go on a trip. Those particular things are called aspirations. And I suggest that people, what they do is they create a thing called an aspirational bucket. In the aspirational bucket, what you're going to do is you're going to put money into that particular bucket that's going to have an earmark for it. So when you start out and you're putting your money away for retirement, the way that you put your aspirational bucket in there is you actually segment money into it. And when I'm setting accounts up for people, what I'll do is I'll actually have a separate account, even though it may be invested similarly to other investments. I'll have a separate account, and that separate account, the aspirational bucket, is going to be earmarked for whatever purpose that you have in mind. Let's say, for example, if you had $1 million and that's what you need to live on for the rest of your life for retirement, we may take $200,000 and put it into that aspirational bucket, then take the other $800,000 and create income for the next 10, 20, 30 years, and then you can spend down money out of that aspirational bucket. And if you make more money in the others, then you can put it over into the aspirational bucket. If you run out of the aspirational bucket, then you need to change your budget so that you either have more money or you've got money that's put away for whatever cause that you have in mind. So that's a great question. Let's look at question number 4 now. Actually, this is everything I just talked about. This is something that has come up because of what's happening with the coronavirus right now. As you know, if you're thinking about retirement, you're probably more susceptible. I read a study from the CDC that basically said that if you hit one of 4 criteria, you are more susceptible to the coronavirus. If you're overweight, if your age is actually is 61 or older, if you have a chronic disease, if you have these particular things that are going on in your life where you're in that particular more vulnerable category, then you may not want to go into a long-term care facility. And this question is very poignant. It is, I changed my mind and I want to live in my house as long as I can. What's the difference between planning to live at home and planning to live in a long-term care facility? What a great question. And the answer is usually staying in your home is more expensive. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to be more careful with what you're spending. You may need to budget more particularly and spend less in some certain areas so that you do have enough money so that if you do need to have someone that's helping you in your home for long-term home health care, that you've got the money. So it all comes back down to budgeting. Now, if you have in your mind that you want to stay in your home, make sure that you work with your financial planner and you come up with a budget. That's so important. I can't express that enough. So let's go on to the next question. Why hold bonds? Okay, this is a real simple one. You hold bonds because they're not stocks. Now, I don't mean to be flippant on this issue, but I want to emphasize that the idea of holding bonds is that they don't fluctuate in value. If the market's going to Hades in a handbasket, then you've got the idea that you can take money from those bond accounts, and that's where your income's going to come from. You don't have to worry about the market going down. Now, if you remember back a little bit ago, we were talking about going through economic cycles. If you have enough money in bonds, you can tolerate going through those economic cycles. So you don't have to worry about the fluctuations of the stock market. It all comes down to planning. Why hold bonds? Because they don't fluctuate. That's the whole idea. Now, let me qualify that. Don't hold junk bonds. Don't hold high yield municipal securities. They're going to change because the municipalities can't pay their bills. The whole idea is to have something that's not going to fluctuate a whole lot in value. And what I've seen generally is going to be, you need to look at holding 10-year treasuries or short-term treasuries because it's going to have more stability in value. Okay, moving along to question number 6. How do I decide which investments to take my income from? Some people like the idea of dollar cost averaging. Now, what that means is in decumulation, you're taking money out. Dollar cost averaging for decumulation is that you don't know when the best time to liquidate money is going to be, so you're going to liquidate it on a regular basis, either on a quarterly or a monthly basis, and that works for bond accounts and also for stock accounts. The ultimate allocation is going to be that you have enough cash that you don't worry about taking money out when the market's fluctuating at all. You look at it from a longer term basis. But if you don't have your money allocated in that way, and I have several clients that do this, they will take money out on a monthly basis, even though that the account's fluctuating. They don't know when the best time to take it out is going to be, so they take it out every single month. Now, I prefer to recommend clients that they hold their stock accounts steady and they take the withdrawals from the bond accounts. Now, what this does is allows the stock accounts to work through the different market cycles that we've talked about. Hopefully, they're going to be good market cycles, but just in case they're bad, it allows you to tolerate what's going on in the economy, and you can work and you can have a rebound. All right. Remember, we've only got 10 questions, so we're on number 7. So we'll move right along. Should I have cash holdings? Probably not. Now, when I say this, that doesn't mean the money that's in your checking account or money that you're going to be spending. Of course, you need to have money that's going to be in that type of account. That's going to be cash accounts. But if you're having an investment account, no, you really don't do that. You want to have the 10-year Treasury bonds. Generally, the 10-year Treasury bonds are always going to be better because there's going to be less fluctuation. However, remember that 10-year Treasuries do lose value if interest rates go up. Now, the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, in the past weeks has done press conference after press conference, and he said that interest rates for the foreseeable future is not going to change. But beyond that, and we're talking maybe 10 years or something like that, interest rates are going to change sometimes. Sometimes they're going to go up. And if interest rates go up, and even if you have government bonds, I've seen this happen with clients' accounts. If you think that a government bond is 100% secure, it may be, but the value is going to fluctuate because of interest rates. If interest rates go up, bond values are going to go down. Generally speaking, if you have a 1% jump in interest rates, you're going to have about a 10% drop in values. So you need to be prepared for that. Now, that's just a rule of thumb. It's not always going to happen in that particular proportion, but I think that you get the idea. But generally, no, you don't hold a lot of cash when you're investing. You want to hold your money in 10-year Treasury notes. Coming down to number 8, does the withdrawal rate change? Yes, the withdrawal rate does change. If you think about the last 40 years of your life, you've had fluctuations in your income. You've had ups and downs. You've had higher expenses some years. You've had less expenses some years. You've had increases in income. You've had decreases in income. So things have changed as time has gone by. And the way that I like to look at it is that your income is like temperature in your house. You turn your thermostat up when you turn the air conditioning up when you're hot. When you're cold, you turn it down just a little bit. The same thing is going to work with your income. When you need a greater flow of income, you're going to find that you're going to take more from your different bond accounts. When you have less of a need, you're going to take less money from that standpoint. You've probably gone through this and you have a range of money that you are used to taking, and that's a great thing that you have. The range is going to be based on what your budget is. We always go back to the budget. We're going to have your essentials, and then we're going to have your discretionary. And you can make adjustments based on whatever's going on in your life from that standpoint. Okay, getting into question number 10. How do I know if I need long-term care? That's a great question. And I'm going to just be honest and tell you, I'm not a really big fan of long-term care. But what you need to do is you need to do a cost analysis. And the cost analysis is going to tell you, do I have enough money in my buckets to pay for if I have to go into a long-term care facility, or if my spouse goes into a long-term care facility? If you have enough money in your buckets, and we look at generally 3 to 5 years of expenses of going into long-term care, then you don't need long-term care insurance. But if cash flow is something that's a big concern of yours, well, yes, you might need to look at long-term care, but look at the expense of it in relation to what monies that you do have that's available. And we get to our last question of the day. How do you choose how much money to put in stocks versus bonds? Well, the answer to this is going to be based on you. The recommendation is going to be based on how much risk that you are willing to take. Now, if I go back and I look at those pie graphs and I look at those 9 allocations, each allocation is going to change for the risk that's associated with it. For if you don't want a lot of volatility or a lot of fluctuation, or you're not going to tolerate large falls in the stock market, then you may be looking at the most conservative allocation. If we're looking at longer term, you may be looking at a higher allocation. So you keep that in mind as you're working through in which one to choose and how much money is going to be put in stocks versus bonds. Okay, so as we finish up today, I want to remind you, we're really running short on time today, that if you had comments or questions, or if you're listening to this on the replay, make sure that you enter the questions in. I'll get them throughout the week and I'll be glad to answer them. But I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening today. And I hope that you got something from today, and maybe there's a bit or a piece that's in there. And if you have questions, go over and look at richardsfinancialplanning.com. You'll find a place where you can request a time to talk to me and we can get a chance to talk. And with that, I'm going to thank you for visiting with me today and listening, and hope that you have a really great week.